Perfect. Recording now.
Okay, so I can't curse anymore, right? Okay, so can everybody see my Excel sheet?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So look, I'll just try and keep this scenario based as possible, and that way it can seem real to you. All of this stuff is just data I've simulated. No idea what the results are going to look like. They might be interesting whatsoever. And if that's the case, I apologize. But the whole goal is here is just to see the functions in action, I guess. All right. So what we have here is a working data set that we'll use to get the ball rolling. All on here is apply a unique ID to each individual, the state in which they're in, the region in which they're in, and then their sex, and then 2 characteristics of these job applicants. Okay, so the scenario is you're in talent and AC, and your job is to screen all of these applicants for qualifications, right? If I just highlight my column A, I have 344 applications. Can you imagine having to go through each of those manually to score basic information like, do you have a college degree, or do you have the required certification, right? It would take, I'm sure there's software out there that handles that stuff, but this is a pretty cool use case or thought example for demonstrating some of the functions you told me you wanted to learn, right? So in this sheet, what I'll do is I'll send this to you. I've put a bunch of examples here that we're going to use, and maybe someday in the future. So we're starting that our job to screen these applicants based on a couple of dimensions. Do they have the required education, and do they have the required certification for the position? All right. So, we'll kind of say that the first scenario is that we have to make sure that each applicant has a bachelor's degree or above, right? So bachelor's degree, master's degree, some masters, or a professional degree, okay? Let me just highlight this so we can focus our attention on this column, because this is where the function is going to go. So the scenario is that as long as they have a bachelor's degree, we can interview them. They satisfy that criteria. They're part of the applicant pool. So we're dealing with basically these 2 parts, right? The education and then our function. So the first we have to do, right, is to make sense of what appears in the education column. So it's like a unique list of values that appear in column G, and then I arrange them in order of kind of logic, really, right? In a single order, right? So GED is at one end of the spectrum, bachelor's degrees at the complete opposite, and everything is kind of rank ordered in between. And the reason that's so important is because then if we have a certain cutoff value, everything that is downstream, logic falls into place, okay? So all we're doing here is creating the dummy code, right? And we've talked about that in last semester. The order of the dummy code has to be logical, right? If there's not logic there, no matter how good you are at Excel, your function and your output will not make any sense, okay? So that's kind of lesson number 1. If you create these dummy vectors, make sure they're rank ordered in a logical fashion. So the first function that I'll demonstrate for you is just an if-else statement, okay? I guess I should also, offer the caveat that I don't know what your base level knowledge is, right? So I'm just kind of going off of the information I've got from Ashley and a few others about where the kind of the benchmark is. So I apologize if some of this early on stuff is below you, but I'm just kind of working on the assumption that we know very little, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in my if-else statement. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. note that the function will also appear up here in this function bar. Okay, so if you need to point your attention to somewhere. All right, so I'm just putting in equals if, and I'm pointing to my my logical test, or the cell that contains the value that I want to base my logical test on, right? So I'm saying, oh, actually, I'm sorry, I'm way ahead of I'm forgetting a critical step. I have to put in the dummy code first. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Sorry about that. So to dummy code these values, I'm just going to insert a column, and I'll just put in education dummy, just so we know what's going on here. All right, so back up. The first thing I'm going to demonstrate is a VLOOKUP. Okay, so this was on our list of things for today. So let me just bring this over here. All right, so we want, if we see a master's degree, we want a 6 to appear. Every time we see a GED, we want a 1 to appear, and so on and so forth. Okay, and that will then be the foundation for our test. So the VLOOKUP is equals VLOOKUP. I want to point to the cell that I'm transforming, right? So I want the master's degree to become a 6. So I'm pointing to G3. I enter a comma, and you can see there's prompts here that kind of help you. And once you become familiar with the language, you'll understand what these things are telling you. But the second thing that we have to include in this command is the table array. And the table array is just the thing that I've arranged over here. It has the unique list and the corresponding dummy vector that's arranged in a logical fashion, right? Now, a step that's often overlooked right here is to hold the table array constant, all right? And to hold the table array constant, you just hit the F4 key, Frank 4, and you see that there's $ now wrapped around these values. And basically what that means is as I pull down this function, this table array won't be pulled down as well. Okay, we always want to be pointing to these cells here, right? Because that's what contains the unique list and the dummy vectors. Okay, so then I hit a comma. Excel is asking you the column index number. So in this table array, where is the number that you want to substitute in? In this case, for me, it's column 2, right? So I'm just putting in a column, or I'm just putting in the number 2. You know, it might be 3, it might be 4, depending on what your table array is. But in my case, it's just simple. It's number 2. And then the last part of the function is, do you want an exact or an approximate match? I'll be honest with you guys, I've never used true here. I've always put false. False being that I want an exact match. So that's the command VLOOKUP. You point to the cell that you want to transform. Then you point to the table array that includes your in my case, the dummy code, or it might be whatever you're substituting in. Make sure you hold that constant, right? Hit F4 and wrap it in $. You point to the column index that has the transformation number, and then, like I said, I've always put in false because it's always been a true match. And then I hit enter, right? And I said masters wants to be a 6. It seems to be behaving just fine. And now I can just fill that all the way down, right? And I always just, it's good practice to make sure it's behaving the way you want it to. So double check a few things. So associate's degree is a 3. Some masters should be a 5. And it's working just fine, right? It seems to be doing what we expected it to do. So if I just highlight, or if I just open up some of these functions here, just to kind of show you what's going on under the hood with regard to this holding constant, if you can see that these things are wrapped around in $, and these cells will always be highlighted in red, right? So if I click here, these are highlighted in red, so on and so forth. If I basically just hold it constant, okay? I think you get the gist. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste special values to get rid of functions, right? These are no longer formula-driven cells, right? I just replaced with the value. And now what I'll do, so that was the VLOOKUP, very, very quick and dirty, okay? The next thing that I'll do is just demonstrate an if-else statement using this certification, okay? So if I did the exact same thing over here, right? So column I contains 2 unique values, and no and a yes, right? So the applicant indicated whether or not they have the certification, I don't know, right? It's whatever it is, the type of desired certification. So let me go ahead and I'll just insert another column here, and I'll put in certification dummy, just so, because I'm going to be replacing this with zeros and ones, okay? So the if-else statement is relatively straightforward, okay? The basic one is relatively straightforward, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate right now. So all I'm doing is I'm putting an equals if. I point to the cell, right? The target cell. So if this equals, let's just type in the text manually, right? I'm typing it in manually, meaning I have to put it in air quotes. So if this cell equals yes, comma, right? And look at the prompt, value if true. If it's true, I want it to be a 1. And if it's false, I want it to be a 0. So if else, if it is this, give me a 1, else give me a 0. That's my wife in the background, by the way. She makes guest appearance every now and again. So if I hit enter, right, you can see now I have a 1 here. And then if I just fill that all the way down, you can see the no's are 0, the 1 or the yeses are 1s, and so on and so forth. So let's just recap that real quick. The most basic if-else statement is relatively straightforward. There's really only one condition, right? If this is true, give me a 1 or give me a 0, right? I mean, I can put anything in here, right? If I said if this is equal to yes, give me I don't know, great. If it's not, give me poop, right? And I can fill that down that one. So your outputs can be whatever you want them to be. Okay, I personally use 1s and 0s because numbers are a lot easier to analyze than letters. Okay, so how many times did I say that last semester? Okay, so again, I'm going to copy and paste this to get rid of the formula-driven cells. I just get a little bit skittish about formula-driven cells because I can mess things up fairly easily, and I just like having it's a personal preference. I just like having the values in here. Okay, so so what I can do now, I can get back to what I was actually trying to do a minute ago. So let me go ahead and I'll just get rid of these columns because I don't need them anymore. And I'll expand this. Okay. Scenario number 1. Okay, so took 10 minutes, but we're getting there. If the applicant has a bachelor's degree, they are included in the applicant pool. Okay, so in this case, I'm saying if this cell, right, and I have my kind of legend over here, right? So I know if they have a bachelor's degree or some master's or some master's degree or some professional degree, they're screened in, okay? So in this case, what we need to be asking is if this is greater or equal to 4, right? So note the distinction here, right? It's greater than equal to. So if G3 is greater than, right? So I just put the symbol there, the equal sign, and then I'm selecting the number 4, right? Because that's my cutoff, my benchmark. Importantly, you got to hold that constant again, right? So I'm hitting F4 to wrap dollar signs around that. And I can say, give me a 1 if it's, you know, if this condition is met, give me a 0 if it's not. And there we go. And I can fill this all the way down. And like I said, I just spot check a few to make sure it's behaving the way I expect it to. So I know a 3 is an associate's degree. I have a 0. A 1 is a GED. That's a 0, right? So it looks like it's behaving the way I want it to. Then what you can, you can arrange this into, we could just highlight this, go to data, and then sort it, and then we could just cut everyone from the top and say, okay, this is our applicant pool, okay? So that command is just another variation of the if-else statement, but instead of having like a hard criteria, we're using like a greater than or equal to cutoff, all right? So the next situation, so scenario 2 might be, you work at an organization and the posting says if you have a bachelor's degree or this certification, you are qualified, right? So the next thing we might have to ask is, or the next thing we have to put together is, if this is greater than or equal to 4, or if this is equal to 1, the applicant is qualified, okay? So to do that, we perform the if or statement, right? We kind of have 2 conditions. If either of these are satisfied, the applicant is qualified, all right? So to do that, I just enter in if, open paren, and then we enter or. Okay. So it's actually what's happening here is we have a function nested in a function. All right. So if or, and you can see I'm being prompted here. I need to provide my first logical test, and it's if this cell, right? If their education is greater than or equal to 4, right? If they have a bachelor's degree or higher. Again, super important. You got to hold that constant. And then that's my first logical test. And my second logical test is, do they have the certification? So does this cell, H3, equal to 1? And you have to hold that constant as well, all right, to keep that cell, to keep that cell that you're pointing to locked, all right? So then if I close that paren and I enter a comma, you can see now, look, I'm being prompted to, what do I give if the value is true? And I'm just going to put 1s and 0s again. That's my default, right? I just use 1s and 0s because it makes sense to me, right? You might use some other choices for value of true and value of false, but this is just for illustrative purposes. So if I do that, I can see that this person, actually has the required education and the required certification, so they're good. But let's fill that down and let's look at one of the zeros, okay? So this is my first 0, and you can see that the person has they just have the associate's degree, the 2-year degree, and they do not have the certification, so they're excluded from the applicant pool, right? If we go down here, the next 0, same thing, right? A 3 and a 0, a 3 and a 0. If I go down here, this person just has their GED, does not have the certification. It's behaving the way we want it to behave, okay? So, a lot of people are intimidated by the if-or statements, but they're actually fairly straightforward to implement, okay? Because you just nest the or statement inside of the if statement, and you provide your logics. And in this case, I just had 2, right? I just had education and certification, but you can build this out to as many conditions as you want, right? Maybe you have 5 criteria or 7, whatever it might be, okay? You can just keep adding logic tests to that and keep building it out, and it will behave just as it is right here. All right, so the last one that I'll cover real quick before we take a break and recap, or not take a break as in step away, but before maybe you turn on your microphones and I'm not talking to myself, this is weird. You can give me some feedback and ask some questions. The last situation, or the last scenario that we'll cover very quickly is you have this applicant pool, or you know, these applicants, and the you know, the cutoff is you have to have a bachelor's degree and you have to have the certification, right? Both of those boxes have to be checked in order for you to be invited for an interview, all right? So in this case, we're using an if and, right? So the two conditions have to be met. In the previous example, it was a case of either or, one of these. That's where we use the if or statement. But if multiple conditions have to be met, it's always going to be an if and statement, all right? So here it's if, open paren, and open paren, and it's relatively straightforward, all right? You know, I'm giving my first logic test, or my first logic is that this cell has to be greater than or equal to 4, must hold that constant. My second logic is that this cell, excuse me, this cell has to be equal to 1, and I must hold that constant. There are my two conditions. Then I close my paren, and I just finish out the statement. I put in a comma, and I'm saying 1 and 0 if false. Close that, fill it down, and you can see, look, you can see I have a lot more zeros in this case, right? So if you see here, the very first one, it has the required education, the required certification, which is why they get a 1 here at the end. The next few do not. The next one is here. So they have a bachelor's degree and the certification. So look, basically, it's behaving the way I want it to behave. And if I highlight this, you know, I've narrowed the field from 343 applicants to 200. Okay, so I'm paring it down to get, and you know, maybe, you know, imagine building this out where, you know, another condition might be you have to have 2 years experience, right? Or you have to have 2 letters of recommendation. We can keep building those things out, and then we might go from 200 to 150, and then we add in another condition that goes from 150 to 75, and we just keep paring it down until we get to this kind of critical number where we say, okay, that's the number of people we're going to interview. And that's, you know, that's how it works. So if else, just one condition, relatively straightforward. If or is the situation you use, or is the command that you use when, you know, any of a set of conditions can be met, right? One X conditions can, and then the if and statement is utilized when you have multiple conditions have to be met. So that's kind of the first example, first, I guess, scenario that we'll cover. If you want, let's spend a few minutes just chatting about this, and if you have questions. I don't know how to handle this because, one, I'm not the host, and two, I don't really use Zoom that much. So does anyone have a question?
I'll go ahead and pop one off.
Here we go.
I mean, this might be like for everybody too, but I know like when we were running R, there was a lot of discrepancies between like a Mac and another computer between like running the code. Do you know if there's anything, or if anybody knows anything that like Macs do differently within Excel, or is it more universal?
My understanding is that it's universal, but I have, you know, this semester, right? So I'm teaching the undergrad business research methods class. Some of you might have had it in the past. And I'm actually not teaching R this semester. So this is my first semester not teaching R. I'm teaching Excel. And I've had one student, and I have multiple Mac users, but I have one student who's using an older Mac, and that person runs into issues. So I don't know, it might be like newer Macs are better, the software is better, but As far as I know, the Excel language is universal across operating systems.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that was a low ball question. I appreciate it. We broke the ice.
I'll go next, Michael. All right, Jamie, can you demonstrate the data sorting? Just go the next step with that, just so we all can see what you're talking about.
Yeah. So in order for me to do that, I need to delete these 3 cells because you just have to be careful, right? When you're sorting, you just have to make sure the top row is your header, right? You can actually see I've merged, 2 cells here because it was just for layout purposes. But if I delete this, actually, no, this is what I want to do. I'm going to split those. Sorry, this is completely redundant, but I'm just moving things around so I can do what you asked. Okay, so to do the sorting function, I'm just going to highlight my data, right? And up here on the data tab, along the top toolbar, you can see there's this option to sort. I click on that and this pop-up window appears. The first thing that you want to make sure is that this box is checked. My data has headers, right? And that recognizes this top row. So then I'm just going to sort by the very last one. And I just, in my case, I'm going to sort from largest to smallest because I want all of the qualified applicants at the top. If I hit OK, you can see now I have, all of these ones to here. Right, and that's my, these individuals, I've just given it a unique ID because I didn't want to create 340 unique names. But, these 200 individuals satisfy my, criteria. They have a bachelor's or better, and they have the desired certification. So just to, to show you again, I'll sort by column J in this case. So if I just highlight my data table, come up to the data tab, this sort button is universal. I think it's been around ever since the start of Excel. Make sure your box is checked, and then you can just take look at all of the ones, or what you could do if these are no longer needed, you could just delete all this stuff. Totally up to you. That help, Mike?
Yes, thank you. Perfect.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, Jamie. So you mentioned that you can keep building the logics on these out as you add more qualifications.
Yep.
Is there a way to where if there was a qualification, let's say education or certification they needed, an or, but then they also needed 2 years of experience, is there a way to do an if or and, or no?
Yes, there is. Good question. So let's see if I can do it really quick. Let me just move this over here. So let's do something completely illegal. Let's say you have to be a male.
No, so you have to be a female.
All right, female. Okay, so male is 1, female is 2. And if I can't figure this out right now on the fly, I'll just put a tutorial together and I'll email it to you guys so you have it. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing because I'm nervous now. So you're asking if you had, let's say you had to have a bachelor's degree or higher, and then the second condition would be you either have the certification or you're a female. So hypothetically, a female without the certification could be included. Does that follow along, Ashley?
Yeah, I was thinking more if you had the education and the certification, if you had either of those and you were a female.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Does that still work? I mean, either example would work. I don't know, just in my head, I understood that logic a little bit
Yes.
better.
So if and then it can be done. So I'd have to play around with it. What I'll do is I'll just put something together and I'll share it with the group, just because the way I work in Excel, it might take me 5 minutes to figure it out. But it can absolutely be done. I don't know if the logic is if or and. So it checks whether all, or if it's if and or. So it's one of those variants. So really what you have is two functions nested inside of your if statement. I don't know what the order is, but I'll figure it out and I'll get back to you. Is that okay for now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just curious if it could even be done.
Yeah, absolutely can be done. I'm pretty sure I've done it in the past. I just can't think on the fly right now.
You're fine.
Yeah, total man. I have my linear logic and that's it. Okay, so let me make a note of that so I can do that. So any other questions?
Yeah, if we do this again, or maybe like after this, can you maybe send it to Ashley or a group or whatever? Send the Excel sheet that you had with nothing on it, so that when we're like rewatching this, we can kind of practice along too.
Yep, I'll send you the blank sheet, and then I'll send you the formula-driven sheet as well, and that way, you know,
Okay, cool.
you know, if
That'll
you
help a
want
lot.
to
Thanks.
fast forward. So, so if and combo, I think that should be a reminder. Okay, so other questions?
So I came in late, so I apologize. So if you already went through this, do not answer because I'll watch the recording. But did you happen to go through, like, could you explain VLOOKUP?
Yeah, I can do it again real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing another one in the next sheet.
Oh, okay.
So I'll kind of give it a little bit more of a treatment there. Okay, so in this case, the way I've kind of my process here is that, you know, we've made 200 hires, right? So we have 200 individuals who satisfy our bachelor's and certification criteria. And if you look down here, I don't know if you can see it, my applicant data now becomes my incumbent data. All right. So I have 200 individuals here who satisfied the previous criteria. All right. And here I have just their unique employee ID. Chances are, I mean, if you're a general HR person, you're going to be privy to their names, right? So, you know, just imagine individual names appearing here. I have the state in which they work, right? So I have 4 states, as you can see over here: West Virginia, Ohio, Virginia, Maryland. We'll do some transformations here. Regions, north, south, east, west, which is within each state. Their age, their race, their sex, their education, their certification. What I'll actually do is just, I can figure that out in a minute. Their income, their number of dependents, their relationship status, and then, you know, their responses to a questionnaire, right? So you might have a biannual loyalty questionnaire or something along those lines where you're trying to, you know, look at associations between really important indicators of performance, whatever it might be, okay? So this is our incumbent data set. Just to, you know, let's get up to speed here, and I'll go through some more if-else statements. I'll redo the VLOOKUPs here. And then I'll kind of, we'll pause again for some more questions, and then we'll maybe do 1 or 2 more complex topics before figuring out what we want to do next. I don't know how much time you guys have or how much time was allotted for this. So that's my incumbent data set. If I come over here, the first thing that I'm going to do is these if-else statements to transform these. So again, I've just created some logical dummy vectors here, right? So the race column is just a series of 1s of 2s. And if it is a 1, you're white. If it is 2, you're in a minority. Okay, a lot of companies use that, and a lot of researchers use it too, just because sometimes organizations aren't diverse enough to have, you know, a category for blacks and a category for Hispanics and so on and so forth. So they just lump all the minorities into one. So I'll just do I'll do the if-else statement for race. So I'll just put in race here again, and I'll zoom in so you can kind of see what's going on. So my command is equals if, I point to the target cell, right? Oh wait, see, this is what happens when I don't pay attention. I've already done this. So I just need to, I had that stuff there to tell you what's going on, okay? So if it's a 1, it's white. If it's 2, it's a minority. You can see sex is 1s and 2s, male and female. Relationship status, or is here, is single and married. Okay, so I'm just keeping it simple. And then I'm trying to think of what I was going to do here. Oh, okay, I think I was actually going to change the numbers to text. That's what my plan was. Okay, so I will do the if else. So sorry about that, guys. It's my first step. So if this, right, equals, and I can go over here to my table array, so it's way over here, equals a 2, right, and I want to hold that constant, right? So if race equals 2, give me other, right, give me this, and I'll hold that constant because that's what I always wanted to point to. Otherwise, right, if it's false, give me white, right? So I'll close that and then I'll zoom out so you can see what's going on. Okay, so I'm saying if this cell equals the number 2, give me other, meaning they're in a minority. Otherwise, give me white. Okay, and then I can fill this down. You can see now it's behaving the way I expect it to behave. 1s are whites, 2s are others. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of this formula-driven cell, this race, and then I'll delete that. Okay, so now let's replace our 1s and 2s with the respective males and females. Okay, so my if-else statement is just the same. So if, oops, this equals 1, right? Give me, right, so I'm putting in a comma, give me male, and I'm holding that constant. Otherwise, give me female, and I'm holding that constant. And I just noticed I forgot to hold this U8 constant as well, so I'm going to change that. All right, so if I hit enter, and then I fill that down, you can see it's behaving the way I expect it to. 1s are male, 2 are female, so on and so forth. So let me just open up that command again so you can see what's going on. I'm saying if F2 equals U8, right? So if this cell is equal to 1, give me, I'm sorry, if F2 is equal to U8, give me what appears in V8. Otherwise, give me what appears in V9. And then I just copy and paste that down, get my transformation, and now we have the actual labels rather than the actual numbers. Okay, and then the last one that I'll demonstrate is just relationship status, which is way over here. So equals if this cell, K2, equals U13, gotta hold that constant, give me what appears in V13, hold that constant, otherwise give me V12. So you can see that when you're performing these commands, you need to constantly remind yourself to hold things constant, right? To wrap those cells that you're pointing to in those dollar signs. Otherwise, you'll run into errors. And just to kind of show you what kind of error you'll encounter, right? If I just redo this command without holding things constant. So if this equals that, then give me this. Otherwise, give me this. Right? I get the first one right because everything's above board. But when I start filling this down, right, things get really funky, right? I mean, how can a relationship status be from? I guess some relationships do go south, right? What a lame joke. Okay. But that's the importance of holding things constant, right? You have to hold these values constant. Otherwise, you're just going to get errors left and right. Or, probably what's even more dangerous is that it looks correct, but the transformation is incorrect. Oops. All right. So, that could be a really dangerous situation as well. So make sure you're holding those target cells constant. So now I'll just get rid of that. You can see I'm just giving you the the labels rather than the numbers. Okay, so that was if-else statements where you're just saying, okay, if this is equal to this, give me this result. Otherwise, give me this other result. Right. What I'll do here is just I'll copy and paste this into my next sheet. And then I'll perform a couple of VLOOKUPs. And again, the goal is to replace the state and region numbers with the corresponding labels, okay? So look, VLOOKUP is something, in addition to the if-else statements and a lot of the stuff we're covering today, this is something you have to know, right? A VLOOKUP is really Excel 101, and it's so useful, right? So if you're trying to perform any kind of transformation where you're trying to transform a list to a different label or a different number or a different whatever it might be, right? Just think of transforming a list. The VLOOKUP is what you want to employ, right? That's really what the command that you're looking for, okay? So in this case, right, I'm just going to insert a column next to state. In this case, I have a list of 4 numbers, right? All I did here was take the uniques in state. And just to show you how I did that, right? Some of you may not know how to do that. So if I copy the state column, and I'm just going to paste it over here for now, right? So all I'm doing, I just brought this over here for illustrative purposes. If I go to data, and you can see there's this option right in the middle of the toolbar called remove duplicates. If I do that, it's, I just want to keep it there, and then, let's arrange it in ascending order. This is just proof that there's 4 unique numbers or 4 unique values in that column B, okay? And then I'll do the same for region. I'll just bring this over here, highlight the column, come up here to remove duplicates. I want to continue with the current selection, right? I just want this one column, A, B. I hit OK, and then just in ascending order, once again, 4 regions, okay? So that's all I'm doing here. That's how these tables came about, all right? So the VLOOKUP, what I'm trying to do is transform a list, basically, all right? So to do that, I'm trying to see what my screen is. I can't see what you see, but I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay. So I want to tell Excel every time there's a number 1, give me West Virginia, all right? Every time there's a number 2, give me, what is it, Ohio. Every time there's a number 3, give me Virginia, and every time there's a number 4, give me Maryland, all right? So the command is equals VLOOKUP, open paren. The value that I want to transform is what I select first. So I'm transforming 1. I enter a comma, and I'm just following along with the prompts here, right? So now you can see table array is bolded. So that tells me that I need to select this table array over here. You have to hold this constant, okay? The table array has to be held constant. Otherwise, when you drag down the formula, this red box will drag down as well, right? And you'll get some crazy responses. So hit F4 to wrap dollar signs around that. I enter a comma. You can see it's asking me where the column index number is. The states appear in column 2, right? So the actual labels appear in column 2. And I want an exact match, which is why I enter false. So as I said earlier, I've never entered true here before. So it's always been false for me. And if I do that, you can see now I've got a West Virginia where a 1 is. And if I fill it down, it seems to be behaving the way I expect it to behave, right? Maryland is 4, Virginia is 3, Ohio is 2, Ohio is 2, so on and so forth, okay? So I'm just going to overwrite those formula-driven cells with their values. I'll go ahead and delete that, all right? So I'm going to do the exact same for region, all right? I want to transform these numbers into their labels, all right? So I've already confirmed that there's 4 regions, north, south, east, and west. I'm going to reiterate the VLOOKUP command. So VLOOKUP, this is the cell I want to transform. I need to select my table array and hold that constant. I'm telling Excel that the substitute value appears in column 2. I want an exact match, which is what appears. So if I just fill this down, if I can just zoom out a little bit, you can see, where is it? There we go. We have every time I see a west, it should be a 4, right? There we go, 4, 4, right? So this is again, just eyeballing a few things to make sure it's behaving the way I expected it to. Okay? So then I can delete that. And now, we're just, you may not do this in your career. I'm just doing this as kind of an illustration. As I've said a lot last semester, I prefer to work with numbers. So I'm usually kind of working in the reverse order where, I start with the states and I transform to numbers, but this is just a demonstration, okay? So you can see now, right, this data set is fairly rich, right? So I have the employee number, the state in which they work, the region within the state, right? That's my logic here. Do they work in, North West Virginia, so the Morgantown area, or do they work in South West Virginia, like the Charleston area, whatever it might be? We have their age, their race, their sex, their education. We all know they have the required certification because we screened all those people out in the last example, and then all of this kind of substantive variable stuff too. Okay, so I know I'm just kind of demonstrating the if statement and the VLOOKUP again, but let's pause for a minute and see if there's any questions or comments, or somebody want to share a funny story from today or whatever it might be. What can I answer right now? Laura, did that answer your question? Make sense?
Yeah, it made sense. My one question though is when you holding so say for instance state, when you're holding the box on the side, where it's you highlighted it, what are you actually clicking to make?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So you just click the F4 key, Frank 4.
Okay.
So I'm operating in Windows. I assume it's the same for Apple, but I don't know. But I think it's a universal command. So if you can't, if it's not universal for some strange reason, all that what you actually do is you just you wrap it in dollar signs. So let me I'll just demonstrate real quick, just so you can kind of see what happens. So imagine now I'm trying to change west back to 4, right? So VLOOKUP C2 my table array, right? So you can see I've highlighted it. When I click F4, look what happens. You can see the letters, right? So there's a $sign on either side of the T, and there's a $sign either side of the U. So if for some strange reason that F4 shortcut does not work on the Mac, you can just manually enter the $signs until you figure out what the shortcut is.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but the shortcut is F4. What else?
So I apologize if I missed this, but Ashley asked in the chat if VLOOKUP and if else were essentially the same. Is that true?
I don't see the chat. Where's the chat?
It's on your Zoom.
No shit, Mike.
Down at the bottom, there's a
Yeah,
little
bottom right.
Where? I legit do not see it. More?
Okay, bring your
chat
cursor
up.
straight down.
There we go. I'm just giving you a hard time, Mike. I know how much you miss me. So, yeah. So look, you're hitting the nail on the head, right? So, a VLOOKUP is just kind of the big brother of the if-else, right? So I mean, you technically could do a VLOOKUP for just if there was just two conditions, right? So imagine if I had only two regions, I could do a VLOOKUP for this. But an if-else is just more efficient in that case. So if I have, if my transformation involves just two things, right, I just use if-else. If it involves more than two, I use VLOOKUP.
Awesome.
And now that I know where the chat is, that's actually a good idea. Cool. What else do we have? Nobody? Okay. How long are we going? Before I even go further.
I think that's really up to you and up to everyone else as well.
I guess it's being recorded, right? So you can, if you get tired of listening to me, you can sign off.
Because I don't want to take up too much of your time, like if you're busy or anything. And I know some of the other students have, we have a lot of like group projects we're working on right now too.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I know.
Mike said the original one in person was scheduled for 2 hours, but we can cut this one shorter if you need to.
Okay, no, that's fine. I have about that much time scheduled, so that's okay. Scheduled, like I have dinner after this as well. Right. Okay, so I guess before we move forward, is it making sense?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you this a minute ago. You're doing a really good job of being able to kind of like make all of this make sense pretty succinctly. So
okay.
like it's a lot easier to wrap my head around it the way you're showing it than looking at things I've tried to find on YouTube. So
okay. So thumbs up from Tyler. Anyone?
I feel enlightened.
Enlightened, Mike. I love it. What a great word. Does anybody want to give negative feedback? Get it out right now. What about you? What about you, Sal? You want to give some negative feedback? Sal's probably. Oh.
I have no negative feedback for you, Jamie.
Nice.
Nothing but good feedback.
Nice. All right. It's almost. I should have a beer with me. This would be more fun if I had a beer. Okay, so look, if it's making sense, this is good. If I'm just moving along my tabs here, right? So I just did VLOOKUPs. Let me go ahead and copy this into the next sheet. Okay. So real quick, these next two lessons are fairly straightforward. Okay, this COUNTIF. I can't get over how often I use this command, COUNTIF. All right. I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you are, I apologize. But if you're not, you will thank me someday in your future. I promise you that. Okay. So there's two similar commands in Excel, right? The first one is called count, And then the second one is called count if, right? And a lot of times people get these mixed up, and they think really what ends up happening is people think the count command does what the count if command does. I think that made sense, right? And they go to implement or employ the count function, and it doesn't give them the result that they expected, and they get pissed off, and then they just give up, right? So the count command does this, right? It just tells me how many numbers I have in an array, right? So if you remember right back at the start, remember when we were back here at applicant data, I told you there were 200 people who had both at least a bachelor's degree and a certification, okay? So if I count column or, it gives me 200, okay? And if I just pull it this way, I get 200 as well, okay? That's all count does. Count just counts the number of numbers, I think. Or is it the number? Yeah, it's no. I'm glad that worked out. So if I highlight column K, right, I get a 0 because there are no numbers in column K. So that's just it's an important distinction to make, because when I was getting my Excel skills off the ground, I was always looking to do count if, but I was trying to use count, and I was like, why is this not working? And then I figured out what count if it actually is. So count if is a command that you use to count the number of cells in an array that match a condition specified by you, right? Awesome, awesome function, right? It's really basic. It's fairly easy, but man, I mean, there's sometimes you want to look at an entire table array, and you say, man, how many cells in here are the number 5 or are the number 6? And that's what count if does. So the illustrative thing I'm going to do, the example here is, imagine you're preparing a report and you want to create a pie chart that gives you the demographic breakdown of your workforce, right? And obviously one of the things that you want to include in the report is the number of males and the number of females, right? Is there some sort of underrepresentation going on that might need to be addressed? And the way we do that is with the count if function. So let's see if I can just zoom in. If I go in, that should be okay. Well, I'm going to zoom out one more. I'm sorry. Okay. So I want to say, so I've specified male and female. Okay, that's what I want to count. And I'll show you the 2 ways that we can do this. All right, there, Excel, you can generally work in 2 ways, right? You can manually enter the criteria, or you can point to the cell that has the criteria in it, right? So I'll show you both ways. The answers will be the same. So I'm putting in count if, and I'm selecting column F because that has all of my sex data, right? And you can see the prompt, right? Count if the range, I selected my range, and my criteria in this case is I want them all to be, I want to count all of the instances of male. And to do that, I just select T4, right? T4 has male in it, right? And then if I close that, you can see I have 99 males. And the beauty of this setup is I can just drag this down, and now it's pointing to T5, right? And here I just put in, here's something I prepared earlier. I just gave you the percentages, okay? So that's the first way you can do this, right? You can point to, in this case, T4 and T5, right? So count if, count the number of instances that satisfy the criteria in T4 is what I did here. The second way, right, sometimes you might actually have to hard code, or you might have to manually enter the criteria. And this is a very, very important lesson, okay? Because this is something I struggled with when I was getting off the ground with Excel. So I'm going to say count if, and I'm selecting my range. And now imagine I want to actually manually type in male, right? If I do this, I get 0, right? I get it's effectively an error, right? What I need to do is I need to put the text, the letter string, inside of air quotes. That's how Excel works, right? So if you have a certain letter string, or a certain word that you want to use as your criteria, you have to enter that in as you have to enter it inside of air quotes. So now if I hit enter, I get 99, right? So if I do the same for female, count if I have my range, now I'm going to put female inside of my air quotes, I get 101. The example, or the results are the same, okay? So this is kind of the two ways that Excel works across the board, right? You can point to cells, like I did right here, right? I pointed to T4 and T5, or you can enter in the criteria manually using these air quotes. Personal preference, right? I personally like pointing to cells because it's just more reliable, and it's less work, right? I can type male once, and it's good to go, and I can copy and paste this, and it's just more efficient. But the alternative way is to enter everything inside of air quotes. And then, using this information, right, I can highlight this, I can go to insert, I can go to charts, and I can go to bar chart, and then, not bar chart, pie chart, and then I can start building this out using some the formatting features. That's another thing that I can help you guys with, so maybe think about, creating figures in Excel. I mean, there's fewer things worse than a shitty figure in a report, right? It is really frustrating for everybody involved when you see a figure, you don't know what's going on, and and the person who created it is really proud of it, right? Figures should not be distracting. So if that's something that you want to help with as well, we can have another session on that. We just have like a figures in Excel and how to make good figures. Okay, so you can see here, right? We've created a pie chart that gives us the breakdown. And the foundation of this is a categorical variable, right? So the count if is really easy to implement when the variable or the column is categorical, right? Really, really easy, okay? Things get a little bit hairy when we want to implement a count if on a continuous variable. Okay, so categorical, male, female, white, other, professional degree, bachelor's degree. A continuous variable would be something like age, right? Because if I was to take, the unique values, right, of age, I'm probably going to have, I have 200 people in my sample. Who knows, right? I could have 75 unique values in this column, and things just get really messy when you have that number of counts in your COUNTIF function. Okay, so when you're dealing with a continuous variable, what you might actually want to do, right? And if I'm going to use age as this motivating example, right? And I'll just highlight the age column right here. In your report, you might want to include ranges, right? So how many people in our workforce are between the ages of 20 and 29? And how many people are within the ages of 30 and 39, and so on and so forth, okay? This is actually kind of hard to do. This was something that I really, to this day, I have to go back and like double check and triple check how I do this, because it's a little tricky, right? So the count if for categorical, piece of cake, no problem at all, right? Just shows you how to do that. But if you want to do a count if for a continuous variable where you're creating these arbitrary ranges, things get a little bit a little bit more complicated, okay? And, you know, you can think of all kinds of application here, right? So think of, you know, a sales data set where, you know, how many months did we have between 0 and 5 sales, and 6 to 10, and 11 to 15, right? There's all kinds of instances where you might need to create these bins, right? These artificial ranges, because we might need them for reporting purposes. I'm sure everybody can think of some examples, so I don't have to think of ones on the fly. So this is what I'm going to try and do next, right? I'm going to try and show you how do we count these ranges, okay? And and then, you know, I'll see if we can create a pie chart using that information, okay? So let me see. I'm trying to think. Okay, see, I'm even struggling to remember how I actually do this. So the way we do this is we insert a column next to the actual data. Okay, so I'm putting in a column here next to age, and I'll just call it dummy for now. Okay, because what I've done over here, I'll just kind of show you what I've done. I've created my artificial bins, my ranges, and I've given each one a unique ID. Excuse me. So if an individual is between 20 and 29, a number 1 will appear here, right? So if this person is 29, I'm going to see a 1 here. If they're between 30 and 39, there'll be a 2. So this person will have a 2, and so on and so forth, right? So I'm going to populate this column with the IDs that correspond to these bin ranges, these age ranges, should I say, okay? And this command is crazy, okay? It is absolutely crazy what this command looks like. But this is something that is really nice to have in your back pocket, or even just know that it exists. And it might even be a case of, oh, hey, Jamie showed me that back when we were under quarantine. I can send him an email and he can show me how to do it again, all right? Because this is pretty hard, but it shows how really this is kind of a cool lesson on you know, things that appear easy but are actually really hard, right? You're probably looking at this thinking, oh man, this is going to be a piece of cake, but it's actually pretty tricky, okay? So this is an if statement, right? So equals if, and I like to work in reverse order here, okay? So what I'll actually do is I'll show you what's going on here. Sorry, I've looked at the chats. See you, Levi. I like to work in reverse order so that I say, if an individual is older than 60, give me a 5, right? That's where I start. Okay, so I kind of go in a descending order, right? So if this cell, D2, is greater than or equal to 60. Okay, I'm going to manually put in the numbers this time around. Okay, give me this number, right? And I want to hold that constant, right? So this is what I'm doing. This is the first component of this command. If D2 is greater than or equal to 60, give me a 5. All right. Then I separate that with a comma. I open up another paren and I put in another if statement, right? If same cell, D2 is greater than or equal to 50, okay? Give me this guy, hold that constant, right? Then I have a paren, or no, I put in a comma. I open up a paren, right? And you have to go through this. This is the only way I know how to do this. It's such a pain, but it's really helpful to to create these bands or these ranges. So if D2 is greater than or equal to 40, give me this guy, hold that constant, right? Comma, if this is greater than or equal to, what number I am on, 30, give me this ID, hold that constant. And then the last one, if D2 is greater than or equal to 20, give me this guy, F, and then F4 to hold the constant. Okay, so I hit F4 every time there to hold that constant. And then close that off with this, and you have to put in a bunch of closed parens here. So you can see as I'm entering the paren, if your eyes are good enough, you can see the parens along the left becoming bold, and that should be the last one. Hopefully this works. There it goes. Woo. All right, so now I'll fill this down. We'll review it real quick, and then I'll kind of show you how useful this is. So I fill that down, and just spot check if you're right. So I said this should be a 2, that should be a 1. These 3 people are greater than 60, so that should be a 5. This one is greater than 40. That should be, I think my kid's about to burst through the door. What's up, bud? Hey, come here. Say hi to everyone. Hey. What is going on? Right. So 47 is greater than 40, which is why we have a 3, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now this is where the count if comes into play, right? So I've created these dummies. It was a pain in the side to do it, right? But it's awesome because now I can just come over here and I can say count if, I'm working with one hand, so you got to bear with me. Count if this column, right, equals 1. All right, I close that, and then I just fill this down, and I have all that information, right? And I can highlight both of these cells, and I can go to insert, and I can go to pie chart, and boom, right? And then we can build this out, right? I mean, that's not APA style, or it's not pretty right now, but I can build that out to make that more attractive and more report ready. Okay, so not bad. That's all right. Right. So that command right there is really right. That's complicated. That is so hard, and it's a lesson on. Oh, this is going to be really easy, but man, look how hard that actually was. Right. So that's pretty complex, right? There's a lot of nesting going on there, but you can see what I did, right? So if I just build this out, I started with if this is greater than or equal to 60, and then I worked my way back, right? And I had 50, 40, 30, 20, and so on and so forth. So, what I'm actually doing every time is creating, a new if false statement, right? So my true statement is, if it's greater than equal to 60, give me a 5, and then my else statement actually becomes another if statement. So it's really, really hard to wrap your head around that kind of stuff, but that's what's going on. But the reason it's so handy is because I can come over here, use my count if statement, right, make a really nice pie chart for my report, and look how quickly I did that. Okay. All right, so let's take another quick break for questions and comments, and if you want to tell me how cute my son was, that's fine too.
All right, Jamie, I have a question.
All right, Mike, hit me.
Can you change one of the ages to like 19 or something under the 20 range so we can see what it looks like?
Yep.
Like, okay, thank you.
So I can, so what I could actually do, right? So, so let's adjust it this way, Mike, right? So I'm going to keep if it's greater than or equal to 60, and I'll keep if it's greater than or equal to 50, right? I'll keep those two conditions, but now I'm going to change this 40 to 20, and I'll delete everything else, right?
Yep.
So I'm just going to build out those, and that should, you see now how that updated to,
0.
no, it changed to 40. Hold on a second. So I think basically what you're asking is, can you just change one of these numbers?
Right.
I mean,
And it just
yeah.
turns to 0.
So if I change that to, no, because what I'm asking is if it's, so each one asks if it's greater than or equal to.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, if I wanted to flip these around, if I guess if I change this to less than, I really don't know what would happen. 25. I honestly don't know what's happening right now. It's not behaving the way I expected it to behave. But if your question is, can I just change these numbers? You absolutely can, right? I mean, I have 60, 50, 40, and so on and so forth. If I come over here, if I just do a quick sum, right, I should expect to see 200 here. I should always expect to see 200 because there's 200 people in my data set.
So what I
ahead.
was saying is, what if an applicant's age or an employee's age was like 19?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Will it tell me as 0?
oh, I understand what you're saying. I just created these ranges because I know that there's no one in my data set younger than 20.
Right.
So if I was to change this to 19, right?
Yes. Okay.
You can see now I only have 199. I know I'm missing someone.
Yeah, there's an error. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how I would do it. I'd always have, kind of like a sum right here to make sure that these counts add up to 200.
Yep.
And then what you could do from there is, you highlight, let me get rid of this chart because it's taking up too much space. What you could do then is highlight this entire table array, go up to your data, go to sort, make sure you have your datas have, that the header box is checked. I know I'm sorting by age, right? Or I'm interested in age. I go smallest to largest. And right there, I'd say, oh, crap, my ranges start from 20. I have this one person. So I'd have to change this to 19. And then I can fill that all the way down, and now I'm good to go.
Okay.
But, I'd have, for the purposes of my report, I'd have to change this to 19 too.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good question. What else? I'm going to see, is there any chats? There's a chat. Okay. Okay. We have, I don't know if people are still here. We got 18 people. You guys want to keep going? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the last, really, I guess this might be one of the last things that we talk about today is the dreaded pivot table. So I don't know, do you guys have any experience with pivot tables? Did any of your other classes cover this stuff?
We kind of worked with them today in compensation,
oh, yeah.
But
what did Ed cover?
He called them pivot tables. The assignment was pretty unclear, and it didn't actually teach us what the pivot tables really used for, or anything. It just said, go to this box, click this. Go to this box, click this.
Okay. So I'll be honest with you. My knowledge of pivot tables is relatively small, right? Okay, I work in R, but because I've been teaching Excel this semester, I've kind of had to revisit some of the stuff that I've learned in the past, and then the pivot table it's a really cool tool, right? The difference that I guess for me, right? You guys know me, right? I deal with inferential statistics, so it's like correlations and beta coefficients. The pivot table is a tool that you use, my understanding, the tool that you use to kind of identify pressure points in your organization, right? Or cases of major discrepancies, right? So, is is there a certain class of employee that are being paid significantly more or significantly less than everybody else, right? So it's a really nice way for you to compare numbers across the board, right? So what I'll show you, I'm going to show you a couple of lessons to round this out, okay? I'm trying to think of how we should do this. Okay, so let's start this by talking about the importance of creating what's called a structured reference. All right, so if you can remember this, a structured reference. This is a tool that really, if you're a general HR analyst person, or if you're in HR and your internships, I would strongly encourage you to become familiar with this idea of a structured reference, right? Or, basically what you're going to create is a reactive database. Because if you think about it, right, we might have sales data for the month of January, right? We might have that logged in Excel, right? We might have sales data in Excel. And then in February, more sales data might come in, right? In our data, you can see how I know it's really a crappy way to show it, but my database grows, right? And we want all of our downstream stuff, right? Our tables, our figures, whatever output you're creating, we want that to be reactive, because the way we are normally trained in Excel is to treat everything as static, right? Oh, I have this database and that's what I work with. And then we go out, we create all of these interesting formulas and these interesting figures and everything else. And then when our database grows, guess what we have to do? We have to go back and redo everything that we did. So what I'm going to show you first, and maybe I should have done this at the start, but maybe this is a nice way to kind of perk you guys up again. I'm going to show you how we create this structured reference so that everything that we create downstream, the figures, the tables, XYZ, will update automatically when you add more data to the database. All right. So this is actually a really, really, really cool feature. So what I'm going to do, let's grab this. I'm going to just paste this into here. Okay, so this is my data, my rich data. Okay, so to do this, we have to first highlight all of the contents of the table array, right? So you can see I've highlighted all of the headers, and I'm going to go all the way down to, it should be row 201, right? So I've highlighted my entire table. I'm not missing anything, okay? The next thing that I do is hit Control T. Actually, hold on a second. I'm trying to think if there's a better way to illustrate how cool this is. Yeah. Okay. What I'm going to do, okay, we're going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by this. Okay. So I'm going to show you the importance of having this reactive feature. Okay. So let's first, I'm going to show you how to create a bar chart. I'm sure everybody knows how to do it, but let's create a quick and dirty bar chart using this static database, right? So this is just a database that we're going to treat as static. So I'm going to create, for my substantive variables, right, I'm just going to bring these over here, all right, copy that. I'm going to create averages for the overall sample, for males, and for females, okay? And let's, I've got to change the line color here, all right? And then, so all I'm going to do is create averages for these, and then I'm going to create a bar chart so you can see, you know, make a quick comparison between males and females and males in the overall sample and so on and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is arrange my data set. So data, headers, sex, let's do this, A to Z. Okay, so now you can see I have all the females first, and then all of the male data, okay? So let's create these averages, okay? So equals average for the overall sample. I'm going to select the entire column L, and then I'm just going to fill this across, okay? There we go, okay? The next thing I'll do is I'll create, I'll just reverse this order, just needs it to be consistent with my set. Oh, goodness. Shouldn't bother me, but it does. I'll put that border there, right? And now I'm going to create the average for just the males, right? So I'm kind of doing it the layman's way, right? So I'm going to select all the job satisfaction stuff down to you know, where my data set tips over from female to male, okay? Do that, all right? And you can see I'm getting some crazy numbers here, but that's okay. And then I'll drag that across. You can see it's, you know, behaving the way I want it to. So just making sure I get everything. Yep. And then I'm going to do the same for males. Oops. Typing what I'm saying. And then I'll go down here for male, which starts right here. That. And drag this across. Okay, so the lesson here is I'm dealing with a static database, okay? So now if I, if I create a very, you know, kind of first pass bar chart, right? If I do this, okay, you can see this is my overall sample. Let's just clean it up a little bit. See if I can make it a little bit bigger for you as well, okay? So the next thing that I'll do is I'm going to add another data series, right? So this is just for the overall sample. If I select anywhere on the chart and I select from the pop-up, I say, I right-click and I select data, right? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit the horizontal axis, right? You can see now it's 1 through 7, but actually what I want is the subset of variables to appear. Right? So you can see now that they actually appear there. I'm going to edit this because this is the overall. This will be nice when it comes to creating my legend. And then I'm going to add another series, okay? So my series name is going to say females. My values are these averages right here. And you can see now it's been populated, right? And then I'll add another series. This time it's males. And here are the corresponding averages, okay? Boom. And I should be good to go now, all right? And obviously, I'd clean this up more if I was doing this for a report, you know, make sure that it's all Times New Roman, the font is black, putting titles, so on and so forth, okay? But the point here is, right, I've created this figure. It's pretty, you know, when all is said and done, it would be nice and clean and ready to go. But if, you know, as my database grows, this figure will not update, right? And these numbers will not update, okay? And just to prove that point, actually, I forgot that I included some additional data here. So imagine the organization grew by 20 people, right? So imagine that here in West Virginia, if you remember, 1 was West Virginia. Imagine that there was just an expansion, right? And we hired 20 more people in West Virginia. So if I go back here, now when I did this earlier, it worked. So I'm just gonna, let me highlight this, right? So when I paste these data in, the only thing that should change is these numbers, the overall. And the reason they will change is because I've selected the entire column, right? But these values, which are on, you know, very kind of limited or targeted arrays, will not change, okay? So fingers crossed that this behaves as expected. So 3.85 and 3.69. Somebody remember that. And I gotta get the 3.84. So if I come down here, make sure I put it in the right place. Right? Yeah. So this changed, but these numbers did not change. If I just undo 3.84, these numbers are staying the same, but this one is not. Okay. So I know it's a bit of a pain in the ass, but right. That is, in my opinion, problematic, because what I would like to see is, as the database grows, that all of these numbers that I've went to the trouble of, creating functions and commands and creating a figure, I would like all of that stuff to update automatically, right? And it would save me having to come back and redo all of these functions and redo the figure, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove those data, and I'm going to show you how we actually create this structured reference, right? This structured reference, or kind of like a reactive database. So to do that, we need to highlight the entire contents of the table, right? So I've just highlighted everything. I'll zoom way out, you can see. Highlighted everything in my table. And then I hit Control T, right? The Control button and the T button. T is in Thomas. This window will appear, right? Create table. So I'm actually going to create a table in Excel. And please give this a meaningful name, okay? So let's call it is it IRSA? Is that the group name? Industrial Relations Student Organization 2020, okay? Make sure you say my table has headers, and then you select OK. Oops. Oh, wait. We can do this later. I'm going to say yes. And now up here is where I give it the meaningful name. Sorry. I give it a meaningful name because when you're in the workforce, you're going to be dealing with multiple tables, and you want to make sure you know what you're talking about or what the data actually represent. But now you can see, right, I've now went to this kind of blue and white format, and I've got drop downs here, and I can, arrange the data quite easily, right, from ascending order to descending order, and I can do that across the board, all right? So now what I need to do really quickly, and I'll just zip through it, I need to recreate this table, but instead of pointing to the Excel cells, I'm going to point to my IRSA 2020 table, right? It's a subtle but absolute key distinction, right? I'm going to point to the table that I just created, not the Excel cells. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste my list, my variables. I'm going to do I'm going to do the averages for overall females and males once again, and I'll try and make this fairly quick, but the commands here are different, okay, are slightly different, okay, so pay attention. If you don't get this at first pass, it's fine. I'm moving fairly quickly because I know you guys have group work and so on and so forth. You can come back, watch the video. We can have another session and revisit this if you want, whatever you want to do, okay? So I want to create the average of job satisfaction for the overall sample. To do that, I've used average. So that command is the same, right? But I want to point it to my table, not the Excel cells. So I'm actually going to point it to IRS, and look what happens. It's populating. My table is populating. So I'm pointing it to IRSA 2020. You can see my table has now been highlighted, right? It's become active. I open another paren. Actually, I'm sorry. I open a square bracket, right? And when I open up a square bracket, look, my variable list appears. How cool is this, right? So I can select job satisfaction, close the square bracket, close the parenthesis, and boom, right? 3.85 here, 3.85 there. And now I just drag that across, and these numbers will be the same, okay? Perfect. But you can see, right, there's a key distinction here. Inside of my average command, I'm pointing to my table, not to column LL, right? The column L, right? I'm actually pointing to the job satisfaction column inside of IRSA 2020, whereas as opposed to that up here, I'm taking the average of column L. Very important distinction. Okay, next I need to create the average for females, right? This is tricky. This is really, really tricky. I don't expect you to understand what's going on, but even knowing that this is possible and it exists means that you'll be able to dig it up in the future and save yourself a bunch of headache, okay? Up above, I took the average of the female subset like the old caveman way, right? I just highlighted the table, the contents where there was a female value over here. The command that I'm about to build right now is one where I point to the table, right, my IRSA 2020, and I tell Excel to take the average of job satisfaction when this female, when the sex column includes female only, right? So how does that work? Works like this. So the command is actually average ifs, right? Average ifs, right? Because we have multiple conditions here, right? And we say average ifs IRSA, right? I get my table, becomes active, boom. I select job satisfaction from my list. I close that square bracket. I enter a comma. And my second condition is only take this average when sex is equal to female, right? So I got to type in IRSA once more. Excuse me. Open up my, and this is tough, right? This is, I really don't want, I don't expect this to make sense to you, but this is how it works, okay? This is really, really complex stuff, but the fact that you know that it exists will help you, okay? I open up 2 square brackets, okay? 2 square brackets. I select sex, and then I close 1 square bracket, okay? This is just how it works. I enter a colon, open a square bracket, enter sex again, close 2 square brackets, right? You can see now I've finished that, okay? I can explain this in more detail if you want, but sometimes you just have to say, oh, that's how it works. I enter a comma and I type in female inside of air quotes. Close my bracket, and that's the average, right? 3.8415, 3.8415. It's doing exactly what I want it to do. I can fill that across. What I'm going to do is, right, I'm just going to fill this one down, and I will just change this last word here to male. 3.85858, blah, blah, blah. Boom, that's working. That's working. Good to go, okay? So this is behaving the way I want it to, but what's going, it's producing the exact same numbers, but in the background, what's happening is very, very different. Down here, I'm pointing to my table. Up here, I'm pointing to the Excel cells. Key distinction, okay? Now, very quickly, I'm just going to reproduce this figure so I can show you the benefit of having this setup, right? So I'll create this figure down here just to show you what's going on. Try and set it up so that it is, oops, I probably have to zoom, there we go. Get rid of these grid lines. And then what did I need to do? Okay, so I'm going to right click, select data, edit this so I can get my variable list. Hit okay. I'm going to edit this series because this is overall. I'm going to add one called females. The range is right here. Okay, hit okay. I want to add one more series called males. And the data are right here. Hit okay. Everything looks good to go. And you can see, right, tables are identical, right? And you're probably saying, good grief, why is he showing us how to do this? Like, he just repeated the exact same thing. He did the same thing twice. But now, right, if I come over here and if I grab these data, I got to do one quick thing. Got to change this to so that it matches. So if this equals 2, give me female. Otherwise, give me male. I just got to fill this down. It's something I forgot to do earlier. Okay, so now if I add this information, whoops, where did I go? If I add this information over here, right? Now watch what happens here, okay? So remember that these 2 figures are identical and these numbers are identical to what appears up here. If I come down here and now if I just paste this information in, right? Paste it in. you can see now my table has grown, right? Now the blue and white has extended down. And if I come up here, all these numbers have changed. They have updated. Oops, I don't want to do that. All of these numbers have updated, and all of these stacks have updated as well. My figure has updated also. So this is awesome, guys, right? My recommendation is for you to really get into the practice of creating this structured reference, right? This table in Excel, so that when you add data to your database, all of this stuff, downstream stuff updates automatically. Otherwise, you're just going to hate your job, right? You're going to be redoing the same stuff over and over every month when new data become available, okay? So that's my recommendation for that. The last thing that I'm going to show you is the pivot table. I know I'm running out of time, and you guys have stuff to do. I've seen a few people have left the meeting, which is totally okay, right? I know people have stuff to do. But I'll show you how to do the pivot table real quick, and I'll kind of give you an overview of what it is, what I think it does, and we'll go from there. So real quick, let me just, I'm going to delete that information because I'm going to show you, I have one more illustration I can perform with it. Okay, so pivot table, if I select anywhere here on my my table, right, my IRSA 2020 table, okay, and if I go up here to design along the top toolbar, I can have there's this option to summarize with pivot table, right? Select that option. You can see a window appears, and you just want to make sure you're pointing to the correct table. I always select new worksheet, right? I like when a new worksheet is produced. When I hit OK, you can see that this format is unlike any of the other formats that are in my other sheets, right? So you can see there's this window over here that has our pivot table fields and our tools that we can use to start building out our pivot table. So what I'm going to do is I'll kind of show you some, I guess, some examples, and we'll see if we can talk it through, and and then I'll take some questions. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is let's select state, okay? So you can see that state is appearing here. So I have a 1 somewhere for some reason. Pivot. Oh, I didn't take this stuff up for some reason. All right, so I'm just going to delete this. I'm going to do this again, okay? So I'm going to get rid of this because that will just be easier. Okay, so I'm just going to redo this. I'm selecting anywhere on my IRSA table. I'm going to design, summarize with pivot, hit OK, and I selected state. Okay, so now you can see that 1 isn't there. Okay, so so here I have my 4 states. Okay, and what I can do is I can start adding adding stuff to my pivot table that will help me summarize information very, very easily. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to add my substantive variables, right? So those 7 things that we've been dealing with all along. So I checked all of those boxes, and you can see they've been populated down here in the values, right? And the default is that it sums, the pivot table just sums all of the job satisfaction ratings for Maryland, all of the job satisfaction ratings for Ohio, so on and so forth. For this, and there's cases where that would be useful, right? If you're dealing with sales data, that might be useful. Or if you're dealing with, turnover data, right? The number of people who have left in these states, that might be useful, right? But for this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change all of these to averages, right? So average job satisfaction for Maryland, average job satisfaction for Ohio, so on and so forth. And I do that by going down here to the bottom right-hand corner, right? So you can see there's this kind of quadrant outlay, and all of those boxes that I've checked are now appearing here. So if I select this drop-down button, a menu will appear, and I want to go to Value Field Settings. And it shows you all of the options that I have, right? So I can summarize all of the data this way, right? you can count them, you can average them, max, min, so on and so forth. I want the average. Okay, so I'm going to put average, and now it changes it to average job satisfaction. You can create a macro to do this for you, to do this automatically for you, way beyond the scope of what we're doing today. And I would have to school up on it, but it is possible. But given that we only have 7, I'm just going to do it manually. Actually, if you look online, there's some pretty cool tutorials that show you how to do that, to automate this process. So I'm just going to change these to averages. Change that to average. Boom. Okay. So now I have the average job satisfaction for each of the 4 states. I have the average of all of the 7 substantive variables for each state. Okay. So that's cool because it's quick, right? I can do that very, very quickly. But if you remember, right, if I go back to my table, right, if I zoom in, you know, I can create, maybe I want to look at the averages within each state as well, right? So if you remember, I have 4 states, and within each state, there's 4 regions. So I want to know what's the average job satisfaction in West Virginia, as opposed to the average job satisfaction in South Maryland, right? We can do that in a pivot table, right? So I can come back here, and I have my pivot table of tools or my fields up here. And if I select region, now look what has happened, right? I now not only have the averages for the overall state, right? For Maryland, for Ohio, for Virginia, West Virginia, but now I have the within averages as well. And that's really cool, right? Because there's a lot of information that is summarized here very, very quickly. And you know, you can make sense of this by, let's say, creating a pivot chart, right? So if I click anywhere on the pivot table, I can go up here to analyze, right? And I can create a pivot chart, and it does it for me, right? And you can see this is busy, right? Because there's a lot of information here. I'm going to get rid of these things, right? I'm just right-clicking and saying hide all field buttons. Right, it gives me a little bit more room. If I just blow this up for a second, right? So you can see Maryland, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, and you can look for issues here, right? Discrepancies. So this blue stack is much higher than any of the other blue stacks, right? So in Northwest Virginia, it looks like job satisfaction, they are extremely satisfied with their jobs relative to everyone else in the organization. What in the world is going on in Northwest Virginia that is making these people so satisfied, right? We can do a deeper dive looking into that. In comparison, look here, right? In West Maryland, the average job satisfaction rating is like 3 or 2.5. Right? Half of what it is here. What in the world is going on in West Maryland, right? Why are people so dissatisfied here, okay? So, and we can just keep building this out, okay? So, if I just, I'll just get rid of that for now. If I go back here, if I wanted to add another layer, right? So if I wanted to add sex, okay? Whew, things are getting really, really busy right now. I have to zoom out, right? So I have the overall for Maryland. I have the overall for each region within Maryland, and then broken down by males and females within each region, within each state, right? So do you kind of get the picture of what's going on here? This is how I think pivot tables work, right? It's a way for you to kind of nest some descriptive statistics and figure out, okay, where's the pressure point? Where are the issues? Where are the subgroup differences? And once you identify those subgroup differences, guess what? You examine further, right? You do a field visit, or you make phone calls, or you just figure out what's going on. Is there something going on in that market that is that helps to explain this, or is it an organization climate kind of thing? Okay, so now last thing I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to stop talking because I'm starting to get a little bit hoarse. I'm going to show you once more the beauty of having this setup, right? This IRSA 2020 table, okay? The reason this thing is so awesome is because I can come back here and I have female. Oh man, this can all be West Virginia because I'm adding West Virginia. I should have done this ahead of time. Sorry, guys. And I think it was north. It doesn't really matter, but let me just populate these real quick. North, south, east. You can probably tell what's going to happen, right? I can automate my pivot table to update, right? So if I add this information, okay, my database grows the next month. Remember, we hire a bunch more people in West Virginia for some reason, or just something happens, right? So I can paste this here, right? Blue and white extends as a reminder, right? My figures updated. Whoops, sorry about that. My numbers updated. But, right, my pivot table has not updated just yet.
Jamie, there's a 1 at the bottom of the new data. Very bottom.
Way down here.
For West Virginia.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll just delete that. Okay, thank you. So my pivot table has not updated just yet. I only have to do one thing, right? If I go to data, you can see there's a button called refresh all. I just hit refresh all and my numbers will update. Okay, it's hard to tell because I've got so much stuff in here, but maybe I can, let me do this. Well, that's what you do, right? So the moral of the story is that if you have it set up as, you know, a table, like in this case, I have it labeled IRSA 2020, and then I have my pivot table and I just hit refresh, the numbers will update, right? I don't have to create a new pivot table. I don't have to create a new figure. I don't have to create a new summary table, right, with my averages. I just hit refresh and boom, everything downstream is done for me, okay? So, okay, whew. Somebody start talking for me. What questions do you have?
All right, so when is it not ideal to change your data into a table? Or should we just get in the habit of changing everything into a table?
I do everything in a table, man. I would, if I were to start working in Excel with data that changes or grows, I just change. I would create a table because then you know, as long as your headers are not changing, right? So I guess the caveat is, you know, the data that I pasted in, you know, fell into these categories, right?
Right.
But I think that might be like a really good practice because who wants to be duplicating their efforts by doing this stuff every week, right? You know,
right.
When you so my recommendation would be to start working in tables, or that, you know, as they say, structural references.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. What else do we have?
I guess this is more of a comment, but so basically pivot
Yes.
tables are just a way to slice and dice your data a bunch of different ways, and you can like change it to what you want to view at a specific time.
My understanding is that pivot tables are just descriptives and not inferential statistics.
Right, but just so you like, it saves you a lot of time of not having to do like formulas for all of this kind of stuff.
That is my understanding. And again, I have limited knowledge of how this stuff works, but I think that's how I would summarize it. Yeah.
Also, I did have a question. It just popped into my head. You know how you made the chart with the pivot table? Would that update automatically when you click refresh all?
It should, yeah.
Okay.
But the fact that I've created this figure, so I don't know if I have the data in there already. The figure should update itself because you're pointing to the columns in the table already, you know, in the table that you've created.
Okay, cool.
So I don't know if I hit refresh all. It seems like this is behaving a little strange right now because I thought this looks the same. Hold on one second. Or it just might, maybe they are different, but the numbers are definitely different. So if I compare these numbers here, 3.84, 3.85, yeah, these numbers are definitely different. This row will always stay the same because you point to the entire column. So yeah, it looks like it's working. What else? So if I just if I remove this, you can see it gets simpler. Remove. Now we're back to the basic one. So obviously that was a 1, but it's a blank now, so that's just a phantom cell. Other questions? What can I help with? Anybody who's on here? What about you, Mav? Any questions?
Nah, dude, I'm dialed in.
Dialed in. Randy?
You did a great job explaining everything, so I think I'm good.
Nice. Janae, you there?
I am. I did have one question, but we can probably cover it next time. How would you get the p-values?
So these are just descriptives. So p-values don't come with,
Yeah.
you know, with means and standard deviations and that kind of stuff. You know, what you could do, there's probably a way. So I'm just thinking out loud right now. Okay, so I'll do some digging and see if this thing exists. But remember, we did t-tests in class.
Yeah.
There's probably a way that you can piggyback a t-test on top of these. Like that you know, I have these averages. There must be a way that I can ask if, you know, this mean is statistically different from that mean.
Yeah.
That's probably out there. There's probably a way to do that. And then you'd get a p-value there. But for these numbers that I'm showing you right now, p-value is one factor in it all.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. What about you, Emma? You there? Oh, someone's logged in, but not at their computer. Either that or you haven't taken mute off. Austin, are you there?
I'm here.
Any questions?
No, I think I'm pretty good. Thank you.
Sweet. All right. Who else do I want to pick on?
What do we want to talk about next time?
Damn, Gina, let me finish today, will you? I don't know. I actually got a lot. I mean, 2 hours. That was a lot of heavy lifting in 2 hours.
I think we should definitely go over the chart, like the visuals in Excel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that stuff is really easy. I mean, that's something that is just formatting, you know. Can I stop sharing my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question. Can you hear me clearly?
I can.
Okay. With inferential statistics, how often do people use Excel, or do they use R a lot more, or another software?
Dude, I don't know. I mean, I'm always blown away by how little, or how, you know, like infrequently organizations use inferential statistics. Honestly, dude, I think if you're if you know how to do some of this stuff here, and if you can summarize data, you're ahead of the curve. You can do correlations in Excel. I mean, maybe we can have a lesson on that where we actually build a correlation matrix in Excel. I just like doing that stuff in R because I create one script and I just rinse and repeat. You know, it's something that I can recycle. So I don't know. I mean, I don't have an answer to that one, but I can definitely show you how to do correlations in Excel if you want to do that maybe next week or something with figures.
Yeah, that works for me. I have this software. It was like an extension to Excel called Stat Plus that I downloaded in undergrad, and that did a lot of the correlations and chi-squares.
Yeah, I think there's an analysis pack, like a tool pack or something that I'd have to, like it's an add-in kind of thing, and it does some more inferential style stuff. But for me, it's just easier to do that stuff in R. But I think if you guys know how to navigate the pivot table, and if you kind of have an understanding now of this, the value of creating this structured reference tool or the table, I think you'll be surprised at how much time you're going to save. Like that stuff is just to be doing that stuff week in and week out when you can just add the data and have it update yourself or update itself. It's incredible. That's a really nice feature in Excel. Okay, so who else? Can you guys see me or no?
Yeah.
Okay, I won't pick my nose then. Okay, so any final questions? Have I picked on everyone?
Next time, can you show us how to like merge Excel documents together? Like when maybe there's like one like the project that I worked on with Nancy where there was like one common field and I had to like merge them together. That was something that I kind of like struggled with.
Yes. You talking like about concatenate stuff? Or, are you talking?
Like, okay, so one data set has a name on it, but then the other data set, the name's been like blinded out to just the employee ID number. Yeah. And then merging it together. Like the one data set has the name and the ID number and a bunch of other data that you're using. And then the other data set doesn't have the name, but it has the employee ID number, but data that you need to import.
Yeah, I can figure it out. Why don't you teach that one?
I'm not sure that I'd like even remember how to do that.
I'll have to find a YouTube video probably, but I can figure that out. That seems,
because I feel like there was a lot simpler of a way to do it.
Probably not. Yeah, that might take me like next week. I could easily show you correlations and figures. I'd have to school up on what you're asking me, but I think that would be a cool thing to know. So that might be like for the following week if we go that far.
Okay, cool.
Alexis, any questions?
No questions for me. I'm just glad that I'm watching this because I definitely needed to brush up my Excel skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's just get somewhere where you have like that foundation. And honestly, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, but I can go to Google and YouTube and I can follow along, and I'm like, okay, because I have this foundation knowledge, I can build this out watching. And it might take me an hour to watch a 10-minute video because I'm pausing and starting, but I figure it out. And then, that's where you kind of need to be, right? You shouldn't be approaching this with the mindset of, okay, I'm going to watch this video and I'm going to just carbon copy everything Jamie does. You need to get that, that foundation confidence where you say, okay, I can build this out myself now with the help of Google.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am definitely having a beer after talking that much. So I'm gonna do that. What I honestly, guys, I'm tired right now. That actually took out a lot more than I expected. So I need to probably go wrangle a couple of kids for a little bit to give my wife a break. And then I've just got into this terrible habit of like, are we still recording?
Yeah.
Can we stop recording?